about. Death is swept under the carpet in our culture. In the hospital, they try to keep you alive upon utter desperation. They won't knows the mockery. Well, of course, we've made death howl with all kinds of ghouls. We've invented dreadful afterlives. I mean, the Christian version of heaven is as abominable as the Christian version of hell. Nobody wants to be in church forever. try to keep you alive upon utter desperation. They won't know the mockery. Well, of course, we've made death howl with all kinds of ghouls. We've invented dreadful afterlives. I mean, the Christian version of heaven is as abominable as the Christian version of hell. Nobody wants to be in church forever. Death is swept under the carpet in our country. In the hospital, they try to keep you alive upon utter desperation. They won't know the mockery. Well, of course, we've made death howl with all kinds of ghouls. We've invented dreadful afterlives. I mean, the Christian version of heaven is as abominable as the Christian version of hell. Nobody wants to be in church forever.
I'm Shitani, my persona is a king cheetah, and I've been a furry since 2012. I'm so grateful to Firecracker for allowing me this opportunity to talk about my fursuit. Use Your Own Eyes fursuits are not a dead art or a thing of the past. There's a very lively, thriving community of us in 2024. You just need to look a little deeper than mainstream furry. Many of us are repeat customers, and my fursuit maker, Magpie Bones, is even busier than ever. When I commissioned my fursuit 10 years ago, there was only one person in the entire furry community who had the skills to build a costume like this. Today, there are so many craftspeople who make Use Your Own Eyes fursuits. This style of costume isn't only a last resort for furries who are neurodivergent or disabled. We have them because we like how they look. Not every fursuiter wants to be a cute and cuddly stuffed animal. Many of us envision our characters as something wilder. My fursuit was designed specifically to match my fursona, right down to the hair, eyes, and glasses she shares with the actual me.
Clint's girlfriend is on one. Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. My name is Luke Radowski here of thebestpoliticalshow.com. As of course, we are going to be live for the next 2 hours with some really interesting, awesome human beings here in-house, in studio. As of course, the news just keeps getting crazier, especially coming from Texas and Canada, where it looks like they are joining Europe in their full rebellion against the state. What is going on here? We're going to be talking about that, plus a lot more. As of course, the situation could turn very dangerous very quickly. Hopefully it doesn't, but with the way that things are going, man, the rhetoric is getting heated. So for the next 2 hours, make sure to share this broadcast with your friends and family members. As of course, you also get to participate in the conversation by signing up to LukeUnfiltered.com. You could sign up for less than $8 a month. And then by doing so, you get access to a Telegram channel that I am inside right now. And we will be taking callers 5:30 p.m. Eastern when we go over to our virtual free safe space that is Rumble. And the conversation is definitely going to get a lot more interesting from here. Another way that you could participate is, of course, through Super Chats, Rumble Rants, or as we prefer, mysuperchats.com. The link is down in the description below. They only take a 3% service charge, and your text actually shows up on screen. mysuperchats.com. Go check that out. As of course, I cannot wait. It's going to be a little bit difficult for me to have this conversation because, YouTube, you can't say a lot of stuff. You got to keep it superficial. And we got some really amazing, fascinating people in-house today. One of those individuals is Ben Stewart, someone that I knew for a very long time who made some incredible documentaries, Climatica, Esoteric Agenda, really top-level, top-notch stuff that wasn't just superficial stuff. It was deep down the rabbit hole. It was absolutely tremendous, incredible work. So we are honored and privileged to have Ben Stewart here. Ben, for the people who might not know you, who are you and how would you introduce yourself? And Ian, we could hear that clack-a-lacking.
Son of a bitch. I got you.
Yeah, well, really awesome to be down here, Luke. So you can go to benjosephstewart.com to find my work. But I'm an artist, first and foremost, filmmaker, musician. Lately, it's been a lot of film. We can talk about my latest film coming up. But yeah, artist first and foremost. I research such a broad base of things. I try not to be an evangelist for any certain worldview, but an artist that just causes people to want to look deeper.
For the record, that movie was called Kymatica, not Climatica, but that would have been badass, and we should talk about that on
Rumble. That's the
Rumble.
rated X version.
Yeah. Kymatica, which the movie Luke mentioned, is...
I'm dyslexic for full disclosure.
It's about the cymatics is the science of how vibration alters shape. I'd never heard of it until I saw Kymatica, and you kind of integrated that into the movie. I remember it was a long time ago that I saw it to this day. It was fascinating.
No, it was like I remember watching it, and I remember being like, "Wow, this is like some esoteric knowledge and information that we're not getting anywhere else." And you really, I don't know what kind of old scriptures you dusted off in order to provide us some of the most kind of thought-provoking information, but you found some gems and you shared them with the general public in a way that I thought was extremely helpful, very entertaining, and more importantly, just very thought-provoking. So we'll get into that. You also have a new movie. We'll talk about that, and I can't wait for the Rumble discussion because it's going to get, according to some people, very woo-woo. In related to very woo-woo news, Ian Crossland is also in the house.
Woo-woo.
How are you?
Yeah, I brought my vibrator, my Rife machine.
Hey, come on, man. This
I'll
is
be
a
little more
family-friendly
specific.
show here,
My
Ian.
copper vibration techniques. I got these awesome copper coils, and I'll be vibrating us all later at different frequencies.
We were literally talking about coffee enemas. We were talking about it's going. We'll save
DNA.
it. We'll
Ooh,
save
it's gonna get hot.
We'll save it for Rumble. For the people who don't know you, Ian, how would you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm a wacky artist, musician, also co-host of Timcast IRL on YouTube Monday through Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's what I do. Right now, man, I'm just glad to be back where the weather's nice. Wow, my DNA is lit up compared to where it was like 12 hours ago up north. Woo!
It's the vitamin D and also the larger energy fields here in Miami that are so much more better than Maryland. I'll leave it at that. Clint, VP, the vice president of the Libertarian Party, and of course, host of the Ivory Tower Gang, right?
The Ivory Tower Gang. Yeah, that's us. Clint Russell, host of Liberty Lockdown, co-host of Tower Gang. If you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe to Liberty Lockdown on YouTube as well. And what else? Oh, yeah, co-host of thebestpoliticalshow.com. We appreciate your work as always. We got Steph on the buttons.
Steph, we are change here. Ready? Let's go.
All right, there's a lot of news happening right now. Enough of the pleasantries, as of course there looks like there's a full-on rebellion happening within the United States. As of yesterday's developments, many other states have joined in support of Texas with their larger pushback against the federal government and the United States Supreme Court that told them specifically, hey, no more barbed wires on the U.S. border. You got to allow people to walk into this country. And Texas said, no, we're just not going to comply. We're not going to be doing any of that. And as of right now, some people are correcting me. Some people are saying there's even more states that joined in support of Texas. But so far, the list that I have in front of me, correct me if I'm wrong, it's Florida, Virginia, Georgia, North Dakota, South Dakota, Tennessee, Alabama, Montana, Idaho, Utah, West Virginia, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Louisiana that is joining the full list of other states saying enough is enough when it comes to the federal government literally importing the third world into the United States. This is a major development. There's a lot at stake here. What is your guys' understanding of it, and just how far do you think it could go?
I think the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, said that Texas has no right to remove the barriers. I believe that's what they said. Is that all that the statement that they made?
It was the opposite. They said that the feds have the right to remove the barriers.
They didn't say that Texas has to take them down. They said the federal government has the authority to remove them. They didn't say that Texas can't put another one up if they do that, but they're just saying. So they didn't say Texas, you can't. They're just saying, by the way, our feds do have the authority to do that, which that's a little bit of a breathing room. But realistically, I think all these states are doing the right thing, getting out ahead of this, because you cannot let the federal government threaten to nationalize your reserves, your Army reserves. Those are state reserves. In my opinion, you sign up for the state National Guard, you're there to preserve and protect the state first, and the feds have no authority to take you away. Some will argue that they do.
I mentioned that last night, that there's a Defend the Guard Act that's been getting pushed through the state houses of many states, and that actually does make it so that I think it's without a declaration of war that the Biden administration would not be capable of ever bringing National Guard troops into the fold of the feds. So if people are interested in actually stopping this or cutting it off at the pass, the Defend the Guard Act, people need to check that out.
Yeah, I mean, this immigration issue is something that's at the forefront of this presidential election. So forcing the Biden administration to act here is going to be something that I'm keeping an eye on, because they could very simply overreact. They could also underreact. But they're in a tough position where they either look weak, which Biden really doesn't like looking weak. If you look at a lot of the larger kind of photo ops he does, he always tries to make himself look like he's some kind of dictator standing on a field with red lights all around him, and he's always acting like he's the tough guy, and he's also pretty old, and old people usually spaz out sometimes and freak out. So what is going to be the response here is something that I think is going to be something that we all need to carefully watch and hope won't be an overreaction.
Yeah, if they were somehow, the federal government wanted to nationalize the Army reserves, the National Guard, they would have to claim that there's an invasion and use that as the precipice.
Which is why they have to take down the border fencing.
Yeah.
You know?
So what can they be like? There's an invasion. We need to nationalize your guard. Now all the guards stand back and let the invasion continue. Like, you can't do that. That's not a real invasion.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what the founding fathers intended for the federal government to be able to do, is to facilitate an invasion. No.
Indeed.
Anyway, what are you
I
saying?
think we're all, judging single military age men by the cover. We should just let them in and have conversations with
Like
them.
across the border without documentation.
Yeah, we should
Give
we
him
should
a
hold peace
phone,
circles,
couple $1,000, sing kumbaya.
I'm sure the 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 million that have come across over the past 12 months, I'm sure they all are good intention. They all have just the American dream in mind. They're all going to work hard. They have no interest in taking welfare payments or anything like that. And I think we could just relax.
Yeah. It's not like we're in a deficit. It's not like we have a bunch of debt. We have a bunch of money that we could give these
We've got
guys.
a huge surplus. This
There's
is easy.
tons of homes and privileged white men and women
Real
with
estate
empty rooms.
Real estate is really priced reasonably right now.
I got to ask you, Ben.
Yeah, the housing market so reasonable right now. It's not like there's going to be an increase in it because of too many people coming in and there not being enough homes. So
What is your general take on this stuff at the border, and more specifically, why do you think this is happening?
I'm a conspiracy theorist. So, when I take a look at this thing, I make no bones about it, because I may not be right, but I catch a whiff of it and I know whether or not it feels safe or it feels legitimate. And obviously there's nothing about this that seems legitimate. and there's nothing I can say about it that hasn't already been said by people. This feels like a setup to checkmate for me. I go back all the way to Catherine Austin Fitts, who worked under George H.W. Bush.
She was at HUD. She's a fascinating woman. I talked to her and interviewed her before, and the stuff that she lays out and the larger plans, especially when it comes to the smart grid and smart cities, top-notch stuff. So shout out to her. You just like sparked my memory of her, and I'm like, she's brilliant. Sorry,
She's
go
great.
ahead.
She has a podcast called Financial Rebellion. I think if anybody is interested in where CBDCs are going or how to, in a sense, take a little bit of their power back from the major banks, go check out her work. But she's been saying for a long time, she was tracking $21 trillion missing from the federal budget for quite some time. And as she was looking deeper into it, she said there was insiders that were telling her the United States is done. There needs to be a sequence of forward-facing events so the public can make sense out of why the nation goes from, like number one down to, however far we seem to be dropping. And so I don't know how that plays in. I don't know what her thoughts are on 9/11, on, the housing crash. Whitney Webb definitely thinks that every single market crash is moving us in one and only one direction. So to me, the way that it looks to me is like there needs to be these forward-facing excuses for people who don't really watch daily news all the time. They're not trying to dig beneath the surface to explain how things got so, the way that they are right now. So COVID being one of them. I mean, it doesn't matter what you think of COVID. If you take a look at the response of it, there was definitely questions about, like, did we respond in the correct way? But that's Catherine Austin Fitts. I'm just kind of throwing it out to her. I'm a filmmaker.
If my team's watching right now, let's reach out to her. Let's get her on the show here because she would provide some excellent context about what's happening too right now. And it should be awesome.
I think the women that I think would be excellent on this show, Catherine Austin Fitts, Whitney Webb, if you could reach out to her.
Whitney's in Chile. We actually spoke together at the Bitcoin conference. We were on the stage together. We shared a panel. Brilliant young woman who is absolutely top notch, like one of the smartest women out there. But the data and information she provided about that guy on that private island that we can't talk about here on YouTube, top notch, best stuff out there. So shouts out to her. And of course, come back to Miami. Let's hang out. And you're of course welcome to come on the show as well anytime.
Yeah, man. And Allison McDowell is the last name. WrenchintheGears.com. She is laying out the smart city agenda better than anyone I've ever seen. WrenchintheGears.com. She is the one who really turned me on to cognitive cities, C40 cities, which is the next evolution of smart cities or 15-minute cities. So I won't go on a tirade about that, but for me, it doesn't behoove me to just give the benefit of the doubt of what's happening with the border.
Well,
what do you think the larger conspiracy could be? And sorry, Clint, if you want to say something, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say we had a viewer last night that told us about this documentary from Muckraker, which I watched on the treadmill this morning, and it is 45 minutes, and it's an American journalist that embeds himself with these migrant caravans all the way from South America through Central America, all the way up, and every step of the way there are UN, and NGO organizations that are handing out maps. Many of them are handing out resources, food, and care, all under the pretense of humanitarianism. But they're giving maps with multiple different locations by which they can actually enter the U.S. So this is a United Nations and NGO-led plan to essentially, what you can come to your own conclusion.
Make America into a third world country,
Sure.
and to implement the UN 2030 vision, which of course is all about top-down control and centralization of every aspect of your life that's going to be controlled by fat cat bureaucratic Beckys telling you how to live your life. Sorry, I just had to get that out there. We got some breaking news as New Hampshire also just joined their support of Texas, and the map keeps growing red. As
Let's go, Free State.
The Free State Project literally tweeted, "We're in." And that's what I'm showing on screen right now, as of course a lot of states are putting their support behind Texas, and this is pretty incredible to see.
Let me know what the name of that documentary is, and I'm curious if that dude is the one who's always on Redacted with Clayton Morris.
Probably.
Okay, because Clayton for a while now has been talking with somebody who's tracking all the way from Honduras and Venezuela where these people at
Oh,
least.
I think
in the
you're
Americas-
talking about Michael Yawn. This is a
Yes.
younger guy, but this younger dude actually, I don't know about what Yawn does, but this younger dude actually got on top of the trains. He got into the like, I don't know, the vehicles that were closed off, and he did the entire hike, the 3 days through the rainforest. Like, he did the entire thing. I was amazed at the courage it would take to do that. But then you realize that there's millions of people that are doing that, and I think that there's oftentimes a mistake when people are concerned about what amounts to an invasion, because we're talking 5 to 10 million people annually, that there's not sympathy for the people that are being led down that path. I have a tremendous amount of sympathy, even for economic migrants. I think that many of them are doing it for the right reasons. They want to come across. They want to make their lives better. They want their children to be safe. Many of them are fleeing cartels and corrupt governments. The problem is that we have a corrupt government, and we have an economy that's in decline, and we have real estate that's out of any young person's price range. And it's like, this is just not to the benefit of the American people. And unless you're a globalist, you have to realize that there has to be a line drawn at some point where we go, this is too much.
Yeah, well, I mean, the narrative that all of this seems to fall under is weaponizing people's compassion.
Indeed.
Because you can make a case, like you said, like many of these people, what are they fleeing from? They're looking for a better life. Therein lies the whole process by which we have a process for them to come into the country.
Mm-hmm.
And that's conveniently the part that's left out by anybody who's trying to make light of what's happening at the border.
If we could put on our conspiracy theory tinfoil hats, what's the larger kind of goal here? What's going on here? As there's some people saying, you guys are being set up. There's going to be another J6. This is another thing that's going to play along with what the government wants. I haven't gone that far down that potential rabbit hole, but what do you guys think is really going on here? If you would theorize.
I kind of defer to what you were saying about Agenda 2030. I don't know a lot about it, but is there literally a plan, a globalization tactic?
You can read it on the United Nations website. This is no hidden secret.
The
They talk
Sustainable
about it.
Development Goals. It covers pharma. I mean, it goes through a laundry list of things. It's
Yeah,
usually,
it's super old news. Like when I wrote an article for We Are Change back in the day, people were commenting and getting super angry because I was writing about the tiny house movement, and they were like, "This is Agenda 20 or Agenda 30, 2030." I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's not what I'm trying to say," but I could see where you're coming from.
I
Yeah.
thought that too. I went through that tiny house phase, and I wondered if I was doing predictive programming or being programmed predictively for this like downsizing movement.
Pod slave life. Soon
like,
you're going to
the-
start hankering bugs, Ian.
It was similar with the RV life. I saw a lot of RV life, and I was like, "Ooh, that would be really cool just to like have my own space."
Yeah.
even if it's
Yeah.
just little, you know.
Luke-
That
Luke
kind of
did it
was-
for a while.
RV life is hard. It's difficult. Trust me. There's instances where you got to deal with your own ish in more ways than one, and those things always break down. There's always some maintenance. There's always a chance of mold. It's not fun.
Well, I don't ever take my tinfoil hat off. It's actually in the lining of my beanie. So
It's actually inserted in somewhere.
you can never have too much tinfoil. I put it everywhere. But I'm a firm believer, and contrary to James Lindsay, who's a friend of the show, that there has to be some level of backbone demonstrated by the American people at some point. And this constant fear mongering about if we ever protest, if we ever say no, ever, then we are playing into the hands of the Fed. It's like, no. If you never say no, you're absolutely playing into the hands of the Feds and the globalists.
And the tiny homes are going to lead to tiny coffins, essentially, for what a lot of people are saying.
and tiny hands also, I think. Just imagine over time, genetically,
Well, genetically, people are being altered to have smaller and smaller. You know what? Can't say here
that's what I
on
was gonna
YouTube.
say, yeah,
and
but
smaller
I said
Gucci's.
hands
There's a
instead.
war on the Gucci's too. That's absolutely messed up, and what's happening to newborn male babies is absolutely terrifying and should scare the utter crap out of people. But it's essentially a eugenics operation being carried out, and not just sterilizing people, but getting rid of their masculinity in more ways than one.
Like 2 weeks ago or something, John Kerry, I think, said, anyone that thinks they're going to try and stop this shift to the New World Order, I don't know if he used these words exactly, but this is what he was saying. It's fruitless. You have this cannot be stopped.
I think he said it was too late.
It's too late. Like the plan has already been implemented. It's actuated. We're in the near whatever he was implying. Is that the vibe you're getting too?
Well, see, here, I get several vibes. I do the, I think it was it Socrates who said, believe everything and nothing at the same time, and you'll never be surprised. I don't get any brownie points for thinking I'm right about something and then eventually being right. I take a look at all possible scenarios. So in the same way, I take a look at what is the worst case scenario of what's happening here is like illegal migrants of military age, single men. And I think it was where was it that, that were saying like, was it New York where they were suggesting like if you have an extra room?
Yes,
please
that was the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, suggesting essentially that they might have to go after people who have an empty room or an empty house or summer house or summer vacation house that's going to have house some of these migrants.
And in Toronto, they were looking at possibly 16% rise in property taxes because of the refugees up there. So, like, to me, this the worst case scenario is this all goes back to what Catherine Austin Fitts said. And that's back in the 90s, there was already this idea that the United States ran its course, will not be number one. Maybe we won't be a third world country, but it's not going to be number one anymore. It's not the Bretton Woods era anymore. And if you take a look at that, I don't know exactly how it collides with the smart cities, the 15-minute cities. But I mean, in Esoteric Agenda, I made that in 2008, or released in 2008. There's this guy, Michael Shaw, that was talking about Agenda 21 at that time, and he was showing this map, and I just couldn't believe it. He said, look at these big, wide areas of like yellow and white. Those are all the areas that are going to be off limits to people who don't have clearance to go into that area. So nature can bounce back because of what we've done to the climate, what we've done to nature. And you see all these tiny black dots. These are the mega cities. They're smart cities. I didn't have the wherewithal I was like, there's no way you could get people to go along with that unless there's events that make people believe that this is the only way. But then I didn't know what smart cities were until I started getting it. I think it was Robert Spalding, who is a retired Air Force colonel, who is saying, if you go to smart cities, of which there are over 120 in China, Alibaba is controlling the traffic, other algorithms are controlling, other aspects, and there are so many cameras that you are in the device. It doesn't matter if you throw away your phone, you want to stop being tracked, you're in the device. So I think that this is a tiptoe, and I could be wrong, but to me, I'd rather consider the worst case scenario. I think this is a tiptoe process to make it seem like the world is heading in this direction. So the only way that we can truly do right by nature, by the climate, all that stuff, is to stop driving, get into these 15-minute cities. If you have a car, it needs to have a kill switch on it. All these things that are basically like, forget the fact that this is the perfect setup for totalitarianism. Forget all that. We're in a crisis period. Drastic times call for drastic measures.
Which is why it's all done under the pretense of climate change. Mm-hmm. I mean, John Kerry, when he was talking about it, that's exactly what that's the context with which he was speaking about it. And for those that don't understand, the reason he said that it's too late is because the corporations are already on board, because the biggest money managers are already on board. And that is how this thing actually went from idea and philosophy into action. It was foisted upon all of the largest corporations all over the world, and it was then marketed and propagandized to the people of the world through the World Economic Forum and the leadership therein.
Yeah, we got a Rumble rant from Crash Bandit, who said, just spending my Fed coin for the day. Ian here is a link, and he published the link to, of course, the 2030 UN agenda.
Oh, nice.
So if you're on Rumble, you could actually click on his Rumble rant, and it will take you to the 2030
I am, and
agenda.
I will. Thank you,
So
Crash.
I just want to mention one more thing, which I wouldn't say I believe it, but I've heard the theories out there that may not be all natural disasters for sure. But when you see natural disasters, every single time I see a natural disaster now, I go and I check what agenda has already been put in place to turn that into a smart city. Wow. I have not, without fail, every single area has had an agenda for a smart city. I can say I understand the opposite argument, which is, well, what if this agenda is everywhere already? Then it doesn't matter where there's going to be a natural disaster. There will have been a plan to put a smart city in its place. But you look at Ukraine, who's looking at rebuilding that. They're not going to rebuild it according to old standards.
Well, Maui as well.
Exactly. I mean, Jump Smart Maui.
Yep.
And really looking deeply into, Alison McDowell looks deeply into what they're doing just off the coast with mining off the coast of Hawaii there too. So to me, whenever I see these, it's a red flag to see a huge natural disaster. And then you take a look at it and you're like, well, when they rebuild it, doesn't matter who pays for it. it's rebuilt as a smart city, which is a device.
Do you use 15-minute city and smart city interchangeably?
I'm using it interchangeably right now because I think the concept is similar enough.
Yeah, they're intertwined.
Yeah, and same with cognitive cities. I mean, that's the next evolution of it. But the thing is like 4G was eventually going to turn to 5G, which is eventually going to turn to 6G, where we all have digital twins run through sentient world simulation.
What are cognitive cities?
If you look at C40 cities, it's honestly, the huge difference between a smart city and a cognitive city, I don't fully understand. But the way Alison McDowell is breaking it down is it doesn't matter whether we have decentralization or not. Every city is going to be a petri dish by which you can push, let's say, a crisis into that city and monitor how people behave. So you're monitoring collective behavior. Who are the rebels? Who are the followers? How do rebels think? How do they problem solve? And it's the same thing within Montessori schools. Schools
Who's the
as
thought
well.
criminal? When do they use their microwave? How much food they have in their fridge? Every little thing is being calculated in this huge database grid that, of course, is all knowing and has a lot of power over you. Steph, you want to say anything?
Yeah, you just said that this is also involved in Montessori schools. That I wanted you to elaborate on. But before that, I was just wondering, is there an example of one of these right now? And how is this different from, let's just say, communist China?
Well, they're doing a trial program in the United Kingdom, actually, of a 15-minute city where they say you can't drive to this area. There's a congestion fee here as well. They're trying to implement that in New York City. So there's a lot of trial programs where they're implementing soft versions of this, all in the name of like fighting the weather and making the weather gooder, but also more importantly, centralizing control of every aspect of your life, which is the end game here.
Totally. I mean, like, what's the difference with China? There is no difference other than the fact that they're farther on down the line.
Exactly.
Because if you look at, I just did this film with Tim Pool called Game of Money. So it's on his site. And we kind of track the whole history of what money used to be, how it evolved, why it went through gold, why it went through currency, and how it's arriving now with FedNow and CBDCs, which are programmable digital money. The only the major difference between that and, let's say, Bitcoin is it's centralized, it's programmable. Let's say in China, there are certain currencies that they've used that have an expiration date. So bye-bye savings. It's like a coupon now. And mixing in with the 15-minute city idea is you drive outside of your area, your money doesn't work out there. So get rid of cash. You can only use the CBDC. Maybe there will be a false flag, like Whitney Webb believes there will be a cyber attack just because she's going off of what Klaus Schwab is saying.
And there's cyber polygon war games where they were simulating this with large governments like the Russian government that participated in it and was literally doing similar things to Event 201, like they were doing now with a larger kind of infrastructural attack on the United States and the world.
Would it be like, cyber attack, the whole grid went down, we can't rely on centralized power grids anymore, we need them decentralized in these cities. Your city will be your own power grid, your own internet, and that's how they'll kind of false flag people into wanting it?
Yeah, I mean, like, to me, I hate to say this because it's not like I'm giving them the idea, but if I were them and I wanted the same thing they wanted, if you control the media, which, I mean, you can pretty much... after the Smith Modernization Act, you can use propaganda on the people here. All you got to do is create the right story, which makes the right pretext to where people ask for it, thinking that they're doing the right thing. That's weaponizing our compassion. And then on top of that, when we're talking about what was the last thing you said when we were talking about the CBDCs?
I already forgot to. My brain works in a weird way where I just kind of get it all out and then I totally forget about it. You got to click the button, Jeff.
But you know what this makes me think of? Because I was just watching something on David Icke wrote a response to Elon Musk about his X app. And I was just thinking about that because in China, they have something called WeChat. And in WeChat, they have money and you pay with your phone, you pay with your WeChat. And it's kind of like an everything app. And
Whitney
Elon,
Webb.
everything app.
Yeah, Whitney Webb says that's exactly what X is.
Well,
It's data aggregation. It's a lot of words that you can then and concepts that you can plug into the AI, the large language models that Elon has already said he wants to work on. Honestly, I think there's a lot of nuance here. I don't ever bring up somebody's name to throw them under the bus, but like Whitney Webb, the way that she was talking about that, and that actually reminds me what I wanted to circle back around on, was Whitney Webb reported on the CTIL back in 2021. Michael Schellenberger's recently talking about it, but he's really only talking about like the censorship industrial complex. When Whitney Webb talked about it in 2021, she was like, why do these foreign, like Ohad Zaidenberg, who is, maybe he's not even ex, but I think he's ex-Israeli intelligence, and a lot of public-private partnerships that connect into foreign influence over infrastructure, critical infrastructure. So waterways like dams, electric grids, as well as nuclear power plants. So the CTIL, the thing that's not being shared all over the media, is that they have access, a backdoor access to critical infrastructure, which Whitney Webb says is the absolute perfect way for you to, let's say there's a cyber attack. How do we know who it was? Well, the CTIL will tell us who it was. How do we know? Well, medium to low probability that it's definitely Iran. You know, they'll say stuff like that because they use the same tactic that we've seen prior, blah, blah, blah.
Well, just look at the Nord Stream pipeline.
Right.
Yeah, they're not going to tell us the truth.
No.
Like 9% chance that it was 100% them.
So I got to make a quick point about, you were talking about how they had plans since the 1990s, just basically acknowledging the fact that the American empire was already in decline. I want to like reframe for the audience's understanding. We sit at 34 trillion and growing national debt today. In the 1990s, early 1990s, the USSR had just fallen. We had by far the most dominant military on earth. We had by far the most dominant economy on earth. And we only had $1 trillion or $2 trillion in national debt. There was absolutely zero reason to believe that the American empire was in decline at that time. It became in decline because of the Project for a New American Century and the endless wars in the Middle East that decided that we were going to police the entire globe. All of that could have been avoided. But I think that the truth, if you look at it from an economic standpoint, this was a plot from the 80s. Like this was always their goal, because the people that are in charge are supranational. They have no interest in national power or sustainability or any of those things, even though they all use that language. They all use sustainability. So I think from my vantage point, looking at the position we were in and having central planners that were already laying out a game plan for the next 40 years that in it said that America would be in decline, you should be very upset about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have no doubt that we are deranging Mother Nature due to large industrial scale, whatever. I have no doubt of that. But if you go back to the Iron Mountain report, and I think it was in the 1960s, and this was UN, I think, I forget what other groups were a part of it, but it was the globalists for sure, that are basically saying war is no longer a way to cause influence on a global scale. There needs to be a uniting force, and it is climate. All the way back in the 1960s in the Iron Mountain report, that's at least out there. You can say, yeah, but how deeply has that, come to fruition? Well, I mean, to me, let's look, it's definitely come to fruition. It's quite obvious. So that is the main pretext by which everything else is run. And you'll hear everything all the way to this company that I'm researching now, Ginkgo Bioworks. They're using Google Cloud Compute to program cells with alternate genetics in order for, let's say, brewer's yeast to make hemoglobin to make Beyond Burgers bleed, or to make CBD, so you don't have to plant stuff in the ground. You can make ridiculous profits. That is, these companies are being spun up by In-Q-Tel, by Google Ventures, so big tech and big pharma and synthetic biology. It's all happening. But when you watch those commercials, they're saying, well, we're doing this in order to make less of an impact on the climate because we have this major problem. So it's just a given. It always rests upon this one given. It's the climate. We need to do something about it. We've narrowed it down to one gas that we need to do something about. So now we're going to control all countries and what it is they're doing, what their production is like, based upon one gas. And I'd like to go back to Charles Eisenstein's book about climate. And he really puts this into perspective. He doesn't even go into conspiracy. He's just like, this is the absolute wrong way. Even if you truly know that our planet is being deranged by industrial scale practices, it's not reducible to one gas. And there's a lot of arguments about the negative role of CO2. Some are saying like, no, if like you actually look back in time, some of the most thriving, lush types of climates that we've had many more parts per million of CO2. By the way, guys, I am a filmmaker. I'm an avid researcher. I don't stand on these soapbox like this is what I'm trying to prove to you. I really think we should be asking more questions like this.
Absolutely, yeah, and essentially, the carbon that they're trying to reduce is you, and there's so much propaganda out there. There's mainstream media organizations literally saying, you got to stop having children because when you do, the weather will be better. And I'm like, this is absolutely ridiculous. As in the same breath, a couple days later, they're like, we need to open the borders because there's not enough people born in this country. And people are wondering why. As of course, I want to circle back to this immigration conversation because there's so many other elements that we could talk about, specifically with what just RFK Jr. tweeted. He said, quote, Texas is right. Biden's failure to secure the border leaves states no choice but to take matters into their own hands. As president, I will end this humanitarian crisis once and for all. I will secure the border and destroy the business model of the drug cartels. A country without borders is not a country at all. We also had a very interesting statement from the governor of Florida that came out and said this just a couple moments ago.
Biden is going after Texas, saying that they must remove fortifications from their border. They put wire, they put things to keep people out. Biden's saying you got to take that down to let people come in illegally, which is just crazy. And I remarked that if the Constitution was originally understood to mean that a state could not protect itself against an invasion, that the federal government could force a state to allow an invasion, the Constitution would have never been ratified in the first place. Texas would have never joined the Union when it did. And if you look at Federalist 46, which Daniel Horowitz pointed out, James Madison talks about situations where federal encroachment can be mitigated by state action. So you have Texas here that's holding its ground. They have every right to fortify the border vis-a-vis an invasion, and that's Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution. So they're in.
Does the Constitution matter anymore? Well, to some people, especially the Biden administration, especially the Obama administration, especially the Bush administration, they really don't give a damn about the Constitution, but there definitely does seem to be a divide. There definitely does seem to be a difference of ideology as a lot of the Democrats, a lot of the leftists, a lot of the big statists are saying, I don't care what the law says, I'm going to do what I want. What's stopping this situation from getting completely out of hand? What do you guys think?
I think it's a bunch of the states grouping up together in solidarity. What was that Ben Franklin quote? We best hang together, lest we most assuredly will hang separately, I think is what he was telling the other his friends, like, yo, we need to unite right now or we're going to be picked off one by one. And that, I think, is the biggest...
I ended our show last night with that exact quote because that's exactly what you're witnessing is that all these governors and all these state AGs are coming out and saying it in unison that we stand with Texas. We stand with Texas. Look, the immigration crisis is not just a border state issue. If you travel across this country, you will see massive amounts of migration throughout. New York has lamented the issue. Chicago has done the same. I'm from California. I can tell you firsthand, it is very dramatic. And I think that this is really a breaking point. Like, are the feds going to use state violence to allow for an invasion to continue? That's really what we're asking. I mean, are they actually going to bring feds in and fight the National Guard to allow for millions of more migrants, which have no legal right to be here, to come in? If they choose to go that route, in some ways, I'm grateful that this is being tested right now because so many in the GOP, the Republicans, those that do believe in the Constitution still, there's only a handful of them, but those that really do, you need to realize that you're being ruled over by people that do not value that piece of paper. As Luke said, many of the presidential administrations in our lifetimes have demonstrated definitively they could care less. They do not. The only purpose when they read that document, The only reason they're reading it is to find ways to legalize their way around it. Like, that's it. That's the only reason that they actually even consider it.
And a lot of people are making the point right now that it's not Texas that is acting in rebellion. It's the federal government that has gone rogue and is literally violating the laws and allowing everyone to walk into this country, as of course they give away your tax dollars and screw over the people in this country. Now, the rhetoric is getting heated, as of course we talked about last night, the federal government's response to this. Some Democrats saying a lot of hyperbolic stuff, saying essentially that this latest move is akin to murder, and that's very strong, sensationalistic, emotional language here that, of course, points some very drastic actions that might be taking place here. Kamala Harris actually said something that I think is worth paying attention to. I'm going to play a clip of what she is describing as the loss of democracy in a very weird way, because it seems like she's describing what the Biden administration is actually doing.
November of 2024, binary. And on the other side, you've got someone who has said that if he were back in office, he would weaponize the Department of Justice. Someone who has openly applauded insurrectionists as patriots. Someone who has said that they will go after their political enemies and applauds dictators, indicating that he would be one. So let's be really clear about what's at stake. And then, yes, of course, there is then a desire that let's get out there, because we can't lose this democracy. We can't.
Yes, we have to, of course, weaponize the DOJ. We have to punish our political opponents because they're going to do it. That's essentially what she's saying here. And if you look at the policies of the DOJ, of the Biden administration, they are absolutely going after Donald Trump supporters. They are absolutely going after pro-life activists. They're going after teachers and parents that, of course, don't want their children indoctrinated in woke DEI nonsense. And they are the ones that weaponized it, but they're describing a fear to the end of democracy if they do it. This is just absolutely ridiculous and a perfect example of gaslighting, in my opinion.
Yeah, you asked the question earlier, Luke. You said, like, what keeps this from getting completely out of hand? You know, you were citing the Federalist Papers, and I've heard about the Federalist Papers 30, 50 times since Biden. I'd never heard of it before. Maybe I'd heard of it before. But if you think about it, here's what I think keeps it from getting out of hand. The more we hear about this, unless this is the actual intention of it, because I've heard some people say that, like, you know, this is all really just a plot to get people to understand the Constitution more. And I'm like, cool, whatever. I mean, like, it's at least having some of that effect to me. So let me ask you, like, do you feel like more people have dug deep into, like, the constitutionality of what's happening?
A little bit, man. But, like, to think that the powers that be want us to understand the Constitution better.
Oh, I don't believe that. No,
okay.
I was saying that as what other people were saying, like, oh, dude, this is all part of, like, a higher, more godly conspiracy. I'm like, whatever about that.
That'd be great if so.
But I notice it no matter what is, like, the weirder and more, especially the weirder it gets, the quicker it gets.
Yeah.
The more people are like, wait a minute, hold the phones. I need to see, like, what the foundation of this claim is.
Yeah.
And people are starting to dig deeper. And I think that's why the internet is becoming whitewashed at an incredible rate.
The reason that they've been talking about the Federalist Papers so much lately is because the federal government lost its mind in 2020 till today. Once they started to work on federal mandates, and we can't go any further than that because we're not on Rumble yet, but once they started to talk about that, it became a major, will the states defend their people from federal tyranny? And that's the whole reason that people started to actually dig into this stuff, because they realized the brilliance of our founders, that in the foundational documents by which we established this nation, they had already done a thought experiment for every single pitfall of the structure of the government that they were implementing. It's really remarkable when you think about it, that, like, all of these unforeseen things, all these unforeseen events. Like, you could have never imagined if you had talked to Ben Franklin and said, yes, we're going to mandate that you have to put something in your body. He would have been like, well, then you've already had a revolution, undoubtedly, like, but they included in those the Federalist practices that allow for states to defend their people from a federal government run amok.
Yeah, the next kind of step that I personally see here, and I hope I'm wrong, is a kind of response from the Biden administration that's going to try to federalize the Texas National Guard. And the Texas National Guard is going to say no, because this kind of sentiment of having an open, wide border is something that people don't want. It's something that's affecting the poorest people in this country. It's affecting the black community. It's affecting the blue-collar workers. It's affecting the middle class the most. And a lot of people don't want this. This is why so many states are signing up in support of Texas. Tucker Carlson, I think, broke down this larger immigration debate in a very simple way. I want to play this clip because I think it's worth paying attention to with his prognosis of the problem and why the problem still persists.
What are the numbers you need to understand? Yale University released a study last week by 3 researchers, all of them liberal, I believe, who concluded that the actual number of illegal aliens in this country is not 11 million. It's north of 22 million. 22 million. Fact 1. Fact 2. The Democratic Party is now, as a matter of policy, calling for the legalization of all illegals in this country. Citizenship voting rights. 22 million new voters. Fact 3. The overwhelming majority of first-time immigrant voters vote Democrat. Fact 4. The largest margin in American presidential history was 17 million votes. 1984 election between Mondale and Reagan.
And Reagan, yeah.
17 million. You would add to our voter rolls 22 million, at least, permanent electoral majority in perpetuity. That's what this is about. It's not about making the country better, serving our labor needs, helping the population. It's about putting Democrats in power forever. That is the truth of our immigration debate.
That and congressional representation with, of course, the census, with, of course, states now having more people in them because they're sanctuary cities and therefore getting more representation in Congress. There's many ways to kind of break this down. Someone described as a larger kind of Koch brothers plan. I think Tucker Carlson surmised it pretty well as these Democrats know that they're losing favorability amongst a lot of people. They know that they're probably going to lose. So why not rig the game to the point where they could stay in power forever? And with these immigration policies, they can. That's the scary part of this.
Well, and just to add a little bit more context to that documentary I watched from Muckraker, he, every step of the way, every leg of this multi-thousand-mile journey of immigration, he would ask everyone on the trail, who do you like? Do you like Trump or do you like Biden? There was no one that liked Trump. Every single migrant that was coming across said, Biden, Biden, love Biden. I try not to go full-blown conspiracy theory on everything, but I think Tucker absolutely nailed it there. If you have 22 million that are here now, and as he said, that's 3 liberal academics that are giving that figure, I would imagine it's probably 25 or 30 million already. You add in another 5 million next year, or by November, that's 35 million. I mean, that's enough to change the electorate forevermore.
It's game over. There's no way the Republicans could have any kind of political power. What else could they do? Especially with how soft, how weak they are. They literally, other than this kind of action of laying down barbed wire and protecting their border, all they're really doing is writing letters saying, please don't subjugate us. As in my opinion, they're kind of... They're kind of the fall guys. It's like WWE. They're forced to be the bad guys in this larger kind of show and entertainment industry that we're all a part of, and they're the ones who are going to take the fall, going to take the L in order to prop up the real kind of winners, the real kind of rigged game that we're all playing a part of. Everyone believes it's real. I think it's more make pretend than we could actually even understand it to be.
What James Lindsay was warning about last night, and I understand his concerns. He was saying, well, this is an election year. If Texas were to secede, think about the Electoral College, all those votes that would come off the books for the GOP. It's like, all right, yeah, but like, let's be honest. Just because this is happening now does not mean that Texas is imminently seceding. I think that you have to demonstrate that there is weakness within the federal apparatus. And this is such a easy way to do it. If you have 20, 25 of these states that come together and say, you have run amok and we will allow it no further. Well, and then the Biden administration actually bends the knee to them. that is a huge win for the American
Well,
people.
Tucker describes the problem very well for almost anyone and everyone to understand here. And how can you not be infuriated when you see headlines like this from CBS News describing how dozens of migrant families are spending their nights at the Boston Logan Airport sleeping on the floor? These were also people that were lied to, but also more importantly, a lot of resources are being spent on them while, of course, everyone else is kind of told to bug off, screw off, as we have this article here from the Daily Mail describing how California homeless people are found living inside caves 20 feet below street level. Yes, this is what a lot of our veterans are subjected to. This is what a lot of the poorest people in this country are subjected to, and it's only going to get worse as now Tucker Carlson is actually triggering the people in Canada that are really not happy that he's going to a public event and describing a lot of these problems. Tucker Carlson just recently said this during one of his major speeches up in Canada.
If they're taking away your voting power by changing the population of your country, which they are doing, and no one wants to talk about that, Canada has the highest immigration rate in the world per capita. And shut up, racist! That's not racist. I don't care if you're coming from New Zealand. I don't care if you're taking the population of Stockholm and moving them to Canada. If you change the population of the country, you change the country. And you dilute the voting power of the people who are vested in that country, the people who were born there, who have lived there long term, who understand the history and the culture of the country, who are bought in. And all of a sudden, their vote means much less. It's math.
And of course, in response to this, there was a lot of Canadian politicians that were absolutely triggered. And according to some commentators, they were going full commie and doing their best to try to get rid of Tucker Carlson and call him out for what is allegedly now hate speech in that country. Here's one of the liberal politicians in Canada literally having a freak out moment.
Are you not contributing to the divide? Should he not have been let into the country? You're all familiar with his rhetoric. He's been doing this for years. So, what, should he have been stopped at the border?
I think his words should be condemned. We cannot accept that in Canada. This is not us. This will never be. This will never be.
Are you not contributing to the divide by coming out here and comparing Poilievre to this and making this about him? Are you not contributing to the divide by doing that? If your government has been issuing this... We're not comparing Poilievre to him. I think
You're not? Have you looked at your own advertising from your liberal party? Mr. Trump.
Whew, that was a great counter there. As of course, I got banned from Canada for political reasons. A lot of people get banned for alleged offenses. I didn't even have an offense. I wasn't even charged and found guilty of anything, but they still targeted me, kicked me out for 10 years. Now they're calling for Tucker Carlson not to be allowed in this country. In that horrible country, that just shows you how far gone, how divided people are, and politicized every aspect of our society to the point where everything now is political. Everything now is left and right, and now you can't even express opinions without people freaking out and trying to ban you from a country. How weak, how pathetic are some of these individuals that want to use state power in order to punish people for thinking differently than them? That's the type of people that we're dealing with. Is there any saving them?
I think Klaus Schwab needs to penetrate the cabinet again, you know? I mean...
with rapidity.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering if you Luke, if you got that thing from the Hill, that $130 million in unpaid medical bills by immigrants in Denver. Like, that's just one example. I'd like to, verify that one, but, just one example of destabilization.
I got the CDC one that we can't talk about here now.
Okay,
I'm gonna look up. I'm gonna get another one. There's a process.
Yeah, so I mean I think it was DC Drano dropped that one. $130 million unpaid medical bills by immigrants in Denver. And if anyone is familiar with Yuri Bezmenov, destabilization is not just one part of a 4-part. In a sense, a way to take over a country, but you keep the destabilization going, and then you normalize it, and then you keep destabilizing, then you normalize it. So it's what I think Edward Griffin called the totalitarian tiptoe, or maybe that was David Icke, but the idea is that you push 3 steps ahead, and then you hold until people get enough of it, and then you say, okay, we'll relax one step.
The other phrase for that is the ratchet effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same idea. You tighten it, it feels unbearable, but then you get accustomed to the pressure, right? It's the exact same thing that happened with lockdowns. This is a well-tested mechanism by which you get people to acquiesce to things that they never would have.
Because most people, they just want to get on with their lives.
Exactly.
And so, like, people, as long as they feel like they're not in the middle of a conflict, they'll ease up and they'll just get on with their lives because we're trying to be productive. We're raising our families. We're going to work. We're living our dreams. And our dreams have nothing to do with pulling other people down. Most people, I would say. But that's the issue with this is, like, you ratchet up 3 ratchets, and then all of a sudden, we have enough, we push back, and then you ease off just 1. And then we're like, okay, I'm tired of fighting anyway. Let's call it a truce at that point.
Yeah, I got the article pulled up here. Migrant crisis plunges Denver, Maine public hospital deep into the red after patients received $130 million of treatments they were unable to pay for. I wonder what California's bills will be, since, of course, they're also paying for Jose's, ¿cómo se dice?
SNP?
No. Their chalupas to be chopped off as well. Family-friendly show
Taquito.
here.
Do they keep the churro?
No, California is paying for a churro reduction surgery for Jose in California, as well as other medical procedures that now are going to be gifted to them by, of course, the California taxpayer. That's going to have a bigger tax burden than they ever had before, because they have declared themselves essentially a sanctuary state.
Quick note on the ratchet effect too. Much of this has been advanced in terms of counterinsurgency in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like when you're dealing with a counterinsurgency, there are psychological warfare tools that are used against radicalized people that you've invaded their land and they would like you to leave. I am of the belief, I can't really prove it because this would all be very black ops type of stuff, but I'm of a firm belief that they are utilizing those same tools against the American people.
In what way?
Well, the entire lockdown propaganda. Actually, we should just save it for Rumble. Then I can speak freely.
We're like 2 minutes away from Rumble, a place where, of course,
awesome.
we get to speak freely.
Give us 2 minutes. I'll tell the truth then.
Ideas without fear of repercussions and censorship. A place that, of course, is worth going to. As, of course, right now we are on the front page of Rumble. Right now, you just got to scroll down. They have a deal with Barstool Sports that has them up for the next few days. So you just have to scroll down a little bit, and we are right here on Picks. And we definitely can't recommend enough for you guys to go and subscribe to rumble.com/wearechanged. It's more imperative than ever, as of course we have a great YouTube audience. We worked and invested a lot here on YouTube, and now it's all gone because, of course, of bad words and thoughts and expressions that, of course, has people thinking differently than what the system wants you to think. Trust me, there's a lot of wild, fun, crazy stuff we're going to be getting into all on rumble.com/wearechanged. The conversation will, of course, continue there. We got some Rumble rants about the CIA already and RFK Jr. We're going to get into all of that, plus a lot more, all on rumble.com/wearechanged. See you guys over there in a little bit. Before we go over there, Ben, where can people find you as we leave our wonderful, amazing Kyle and Karen YouTube audience? You stay on YouTube, you're a Kyle and Karen, just so you know that. You're a Giga Chad or Chidetta if you go to rumble.com. Sorry, go ahead,
Nice.
Ben.
Yeah, go to benjosephstewart.com. That way you can get access to all my exclusive content that I can't talk about on YouTube. I dive deep on the hijacking of our genes and much, much more. I would also recommend you go, and this is as much as I can say, go to unsafeandineffective.com. It's a film I made with Aubrey Marcus. You'll find it interesting.
Nice.
Let me just be the first to say I'm looking forward to vibrating with all of you guys on Rumble, and I'm serious. Like, I just want to emanate and experience the spirit, because it's like, how does it feel? Yeah, 530 hertz, it's great, but how does it feel this time? That's what I want to find out. So I'll see you there.
You tell him, Ian. You tell him right away. He brought a Rife machine here. We'll get into that. Plus
old
a lot
vibrator.
more. Clint tried to sit on it. I don't know what you were doing, man, but
I'm just trying to vibrate on the highest level, brother.
I'll take you there.
You can follow him at Ian Carlson, by the way. He was vibrating on too high of a level to plug his own stuff. At Liberty Lock Pod on X, if you subscribe, I will follow you back. I appreciate the support for my work. Liberty Lockdown's the show. I put out a new episode last night that's banger. Check it out. And Tower Gang, I do too, but you shouldn't subscribe to that. And I will be in Georgia this weekend moderating the LP presidential debate. I have announced I am running as the vice president candidate for the LP, and we'll also be doing a live Tower Gang, which you should not watch because it'll be very inappropriate. Steph,
We Are Change. You can follow me on Instagram at Steph We Are Change or on Twitter at Steph WRC.
You have a choice. You have a very important decision to make right now. Do you want the Kyle and Karen pill, or do you